Hi, everyone, and welcome to the League of Women Voter of Pennsylvania's first ever Ballot Box Basics webinar series. This webinar series is intended to provide you as voters with the information that you need to register and understand elections and government during this very important election year. For those of you that are not familiar with the League of Women Voters, we are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization based in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. We have a wonderful statewide network of local league chapters that do voter registration, voter education, and policy advocacy on the ground. And tonight, during this very important lead up to the May primaries, I'm very pleased to introduce Rochelle Kaplan. Rochelle is the Director of Voter Services for the League of Women Voters of Pennsylvania, and she will be headlining this event along with Jaslyn from Vote Writers, who will be joining us momentarily. So Rochelle, please go ahead and kick it off. Everyone, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please use the Q&A function in the chat, and we'll save questions for the end of the conversation. So Rochelle, after you.
Well, thanks millions, Meg. And if any of you know me, you know how much I love technology. And this is just one of those nights that it decided it didn't want to behave. So as Meg said, I am the Director of Voter Services, and I get to chair a wonderful group of voter services chairs throughout Pennsylvania. There are about 30 local leagues in Pennsylvania, 33, and 2/3 of those folks sit on this voter services committee. This series, Ballot Box Basics, is a brainchild of the voter services group as well as Meg. Voter services, the top priority is voter education, because our feeling is if people feel confident about voting, they will want to vote. They will feel that, yes, I can do this very important civic obligation. So I'm going to share my screen. Let's hope this works. Okay, Ballot Box Basics. So this is, as Meg said, this is the first in our series. We're going to be offering these 1-hour seminars starting in April and going through October. Some of the other 1-hour subjects we're going to be discussing are voter access and integrity of the elections, which will be in May. We will be talking about the structure of government, both state, federal, as well as local. The Pennsylvania election law, we'll get into the specifics of that. And because the use of constitutional amendments has become very present by our General Assembly, in October, we're going to be talking about the constitutional amendment process and some of the substantive constitutional amendments. So we hope that you stay tuned for all of those. But for now, we're just going to talk about the mechanics, the how-to of voting. And I'd like to start off by asking you to put in the chat, obviously, where you're from, your name, but I'd like to hear from you as to why you think it's important to vote, because we know that voting, every election counts, you count, so go vote. So when I was putting the presentation together, I challenged myself, why do I vote? Now, I'd like to think that I'm like Abraham Lincoln that comes up with these brilliant statements about, yes, you can be qualified to vote, but qualified voters who choose to vote are the ones that constitute political power of the state. So when I think of it, I vote because I know that voting is the foundation of democracy. It's from where everything else stems. Voting is my voice. It's the way I let candidates, incumbents know where I stand on things. Voting permits me to hold politicians accountable. If I don't like what's going on, I can vote against that person when they're up for election again. Voting also is my opportunity to change things. Now, I'm not dismissing the value of letter writing, contacting your legislator, or participating in rallies and protests. Also very important. But voting is the one time that you are specifically making a statement that a politician hears. Because if a politician doesn't get enough votes, guess what? They are no longer a representative, or they can't be a representative. And as you can see, I firmly believe every vote matters. And let me just tell you two very short stories that happened in Lehigh County. One story has to do with a state representative election where over 25 to 30,000 people cast their ballot. That election was decided by 55 votes. Think about it. In another election, it was a countywide judicial election where over 200,000 people voted. That election was decided by 74 ballots. So when I say every vote matters, it matters. Now, when do Pennsylvanians vote? Well, Pennsylvanians vote every year. I'll say it again. Pennsylvanians vote every year. And some of us get to vote twice a year. That's why I have an asterisk. And I'll talk about that in a minute when I talk about the primaries. The difference between years only has to do with who you vote for. So if anybody tells you this is a quote unquote off-year election, tell them no, it isn't. It is an important election. So in even years in Pennsylvania, we vote for federal level and state level candidates. In odd number years elections, we vote for local or municipal folks, and we vote for our judges, even statewide judges. Now, we have three types of elections in Pennsylvania, and this is where my asterisk comes in. In primary elections, while it's the first, this year it's the third Tuesday in May, presidential years, it's the fourth Tuesday in April. I have an asterisk because we have a closed primary system in Pennsylvania. We are only one of 9 states that has such a system. What does that mean? That means that only if you're registered as a Republican or registered as a Democrat can you vote. And in fact, when you get your ballot, either in person or by mail, you will get a ballot that only has your party's candidates on it. So you can't vote for any other candidate in another party, nor will you see third-party candidates on a ballot. It is strictly the 2 major parties. Now, this is unfortunate in Pennsylvania, and the League of Women Voters is advocating to open the primary. First of all, it's important because right now we only get 18 to 20% turnout. Think about it. Because when you vote in a primary, you're making a decision what candidates are going to be in your general election ballot. So only 18 to 20% of the voters in Pennsylvania are making that important decision. There's over 1 million individuals that have chosen not to select a party when they register to vote. Those people are disenfranchised every single primary election. So it is very important that we change our system to open primaries to all those important voices out there that are not being heard. Our next election is our general election. That happens the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. That's a mouthful. That means that if October 31st is a Monday, November 1st is not the election day, because October 31st is not the first Monday in November. In this election, people can vote for anyone on the ballot. It's not party restricted, plus third parties can be on the ballot and anyone can vote for them. And I just wanted to make one caveat to the primary that I forgot. If you are an unaffiliated voter or registered as a third party, and there are ballot questions, either a statewide ballot question or a local initiative on your primary ballot, you can vote for that initiative. But you're not going to get a ballot with candidates on it. Our third kind of election is a special election, and this happens when a current incumbent in a particular position can no longer serve, whether they've resigned, they've decided to retire, they got ill, they sadly passed away, or they were removed from office for some reason. Special elections will be held. I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritty about who makes the decision of what date it would be, but it could either be during a general election, a primary election, or on a totally different day. Now, the only people that can vote for those folks in this special election are the folks that live in that district where that incumbent resides or the vacancy occurs. That's it. The good news for special elections is unaffiliated and third-party registered individuals can vote in special elections. So now that we know what elections we have in Pennsylvania, let's talk about who gets to vote. And first of all, anybody that wants to vote just needs to register to vote. And in Pennsylvania, there's not a lot of qualifications. Just have to be 18 years of age. You have to be a citizen, and you have to be a resident of the state for 30 days and the district in which you're voting. Now, once again, there are certain rules for Pennsylvania residents if they move to a different polling precinct, if they move to a different county. And if anybody has questions on that, I will certainly address them during the Q&A. College students that are in Pennsylvania going to college, or Pennsylvania residents that are just going to college in a different county than where they live, they have a choice. They can register at their home address, or they can register at their campus address, but they can't register at both addresses. Moreover, individuals who have been arrested or convicted of a crime can also register to vote under the conditions that I've listed on the slide. If a person was arrested and is awaiting trial, whether they were arrested for a felony or a misdemeanor, they can register to vote. If a person's been convicted of a misdemeanor and is serving their sentence in jail, they can register to vote. If a person is released and will be released by the date of the election on probation, parole, or on house arrest, that person can register to vote. So it's real easy to register to vote. You have up to 15 days prior to the election to register. There are 4 easy ways to register. You can go online to the Department of State and register online. You can do it by mail by either getting voter registration application from a League of Women Voters, where they hold their events. They're always giving out voter registration applications. You can also go online and download an application from the Department of State website. You can go to your county voter registration office and get an application, or you could go to PennDOT and several other government agencies. Now, the listing of other government agencies is once again on the Department of State website. If anybody's interested, I'd be glad to answer in the chat or provide that information. Now, I would spend time trying to show you what the application looks like, but the technology hasn't been helpful tonight, so I'm not going to spend time doing it. But when I tell you that it's easy to get to and download, you will see, go on the Department of State website, hit how do I register to vote, and the instructions and the application will be right there. So now that we're registered to vote, how do I vote in Pennsylvania? Well, there's two ways. You can go in person at the polls, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes, or you can get a mail-in ballot. Now, there's two types of mail-in ballot. There's what is called no excuse. That means you don't have to put a reason in your application. You just say, I want a mail-in ballot. Or there is an absentee ballot where you do have an excuse. You're going to be out of the voting district on the day of the election, or you're too ill, injured, or disabled to go to your polling place. The way you apply for the mail-in ballot is at the same location. You just go to votepa.gov or pavoterservicespa.gov, and you can get an application. You can also go to your county voter registration website or your county voter registration office and get an application. You have until 7 days before the election to apply, but I'm going to make a plug for the county voter registration staff. When applications come in 7 days before the election, it puts a lot of stress to get you the ballot in time for you to complete the ballot, so the ballot gets back to them on election day. So if tonight you decide, hey, I want to vote by mail, apply tonight, get online tonight, fill out the application, have it sent in, or go to your county voter registration office tomorrow, get a paper application for the mail-in ballot and fill it out. I will tell you that people have said that they get these applications in the mail. I will tell you, fill out only one. If you fill out more than one application, you're still going to get one ballot. It's one ballot a person. So let's say you've decided, I want to vote by mail, and I filled out my application. After the ballot has been finalized in your county, you will get in the mail an official looking envelope from your voter registration office. If it's not from your voter registration office, then it's not the official ballot, but it will say on it, official ballot. In that big envelope that you're going to get, there's going to be four things. There's going to be instructions. There's going to be the ballot. Then there's going to be a white envelope that says official election ballot on it. That's all it's going to say. That's also called the secrecy ballot. And the fourth thing in this big mailer that you're going to get is your return envelope, which will have your voter registration, office address on one side, and on the other side, there will be a voter declaration on the back of it. Some counties are providing postage, some counties are not. We have 67 counties, each one is doing their own thing, so you'll just have to see whether your return envelope has postage paid or whether you're going to have to put postage on it. But here's the real important stuff, and you can see I put some of the things in red. Read the instructions before you fill out your ballot. After you read the instructions, make your choices, turn the ballot over. After you've made your choices on the front, turn the ballot over, make sure that there's nothing on the back. There's no candidates on the back that you need to vote for or any other initiative. After you make your choices, you put the ballot in the white secrecy envelope. Seal it, don't put anything on it. If you don't put your ballot in the white secrecy envelope and you return it to voter registration, it will not be counted. Put it in the secrecy envelope. After you put it in the secrecy envelope, you put that secrecy envelope that has your ballot in it into the pre-addressed official election ballot envelope and seal it. But you're not done yet. You're going to then sign it and date it. You're going to sign it and date it. If one of those things are missing, that is, you signed it, you didn't date it, or you dated it and you didn't sign it, your vote will not be counted. Very important. Lehigh County, that 74 difference vote that I mentioned before, that had to do with votes that were thrown out because there was no date on it. Even though the ballot was returned within the proper time, got there way before Election Day, it was not counted. So please, secrecy envelope, sign and date. Now, how do I return it? There are several ways. You can put it in the US Postal Service in your mailbox, take it to the post office. You can go to a drop box if your counties provide drop boxes, or you can take it to your county voter registration office. Your county website will give you the dates and times for drop box drop off and when you can drop it off at the office in person. Now, the only other thing I want to say about drop boxes, very important, you can only take yours and drop it off at a drop box. You can't take anybody else's unless you're considered a designated agent for a person who's disabled, injured, ill, and cannot otherwise drop it off at the drop box yourself. That's what the law says, so you have to comply with that. Now, let's say you decide to vote at the polls. Well, the polls open at 7 o'clock in the morning, it ends at 8 o'clock in the evening on Election Day. When you get to the polls, you're going to see a staff of poll workers. I call them, and the league refers to them as democracy's essential workers, because they are that. They are engaged in one of the highest forms of civic duties one can engage in. They ensure that your experience is positive, undisturbed, safe, and secure. They will check you in. They will give you your ballot. They will show you where you can fill out your ballot in privacy. They will show you where the voting machine is in your county. There'll be instructions on how to use that voting machine. Know that each voting machine used in each county is safe and secure. It is not connected to the internet, and it is backed up by voter verifiable paper records. If you want to learn more about your county's voting system, you can go on the Department of State's website where this link is, and you can go right to your county, or you can go to your county's website. I would say almost every county has some short video showing how their voting machines work. If you're not sure where your polling location is, once again, you can go on your county's voter registration website, or you can go to our crown jewel, vote411.org, which I'll talk about a little bit later. You have rights as a voter. If you get in line at 7:59 p.m. on election day, you get to vote. So if you're in line and it turns to be 8 o'clock, but you were in line before 8 o'clock, you still get to vote. If you make a mistake on your ballot, you can ask one of the poll workers for another ballot. If the machines are down at your polling place, you vote by paper ballot. If when you check in, a worker is not sure about your eligibility, you may have moved, the address is off, your name isn't in their system quite right, you can ask for a provisional ballot and you will get one. Provisional ballots are counted after all of the other ballots are counted at voter registration, because they've got to check your eligibility to make sure that you were in the right polling place and you could vote for the folks that you voted for. But nobody can turn you away. You can get that provisional ballot. That goes with all the other ballots. The end of the night, those poll workers put all the ballots together in secure pouches, and they physically transfer all that to voter registration. There are also certain phone numbers that will give you information if you have accessibility needs or if you have problems or questions about voting or about your polling place. And we will be sending you these slides so that you'll be able to have these phone numbers at your disposal. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen because Jaslyn, who is the expert on voter ID, is now going to talk to you about the voter ID requirements in Pennsylvania and what her fabulous organization does.
Thank you so much, Rochelle. I am going to go ahead and start my video on voter ID. Thank you for the wonderful information on voting. I'm going to go ahead and jump into what you need to take with you to the polls now that we all know how to get registered, how to make sure that we fill out our ballot on election day and all that good stuff. We can go ahead and talk about what to bring with you. So my name is Jasmine Gallego. I am the State Outreach Director for Vote Riders. We are a 501c3 nonprofit that's nationwide. I'm a Central Florida native, currently based in Washington, D.C. I joined Vote Riders in 2018. I initially was very much involved in different nonprofit causes, including the fight against hunger and human trafficking, and fell into politics, realizing how intersectional many of these issues are. So if there's something that you're very passionate about, it's super important that you get all your family and friends out to the polls with you. I graduated from Rollins College in 2018 with a degree in international relations and minor in economics, and I'm currently a graduate student at Georgetown University. And since then, I have been loving my role with Vote Riders and helping many voters be able to obtain the ID that they need to vote, and also to complete many of the very essential things that they need to do in their day-to-day lives. So what is voter ID? Voter ID is required, is ID that is required in your state for voting. Many people often confuse voter ID for their voter registration card, but they are two very different things. So your ID is what is required in your state as your proof of identity. Some states, for example, like Pennsylvania, only require your ID during your first time voting, versus other states might require it at all times. So it's just important to know your ID law. If you move to a different state, might want to check on that because it might differ from state to state. A common question that we get asked is why it could possibly be a difficult thing to get an ID. Many times we get approached with the question, well, doesn't everyone have an ID? And barriers can vary between taking time off work to the cost of underlying documents like birth certificates and marriage certificates, in addition to finding transportation to and from Department of Motor Vehicles and other government offices that you might need to go to for these underlying documents. And that's what we're here for. We provide assistance with all of that and financial assistance covering the cost of all of the things that I just named. So another question that we get asked pretty often is, why would someone not have an ID? So it's not that people have never had an ID before. It's most often that their ID was lost, their wallet was stolen, or they are a homeless person or a transient person living below the poverty line. And when you're moving around so much, it's very easy for you to lose either your ID license or the supporting documents that you need. And then most commonly, people need an ID when they move from state to state. You need to be able to update that ID so that you can start work or apply for housing. So if you've just recently moved to a new state, you do need to go ahead and get that ID again. So it's not that individuals might never have had an ID, it's that they need a new one for those very likely reasons. As many as 25 million voting age Americans do not have a current government issued ID. And that is as many as it's predicted to be about 11% of eligible voters in our nation. So it's a very big number of the population. When you start to think about it, that's a very sizable part of the voting bloc. So what are we doing about it? We are celebrating our 10-year anniversary this month in April. We were founded in 2012 as a direct response to increasing voter ID laws around the country. We are nonpartisan, so we are willing to work with just about every organization, so long as they're also nonpartisan. You can go ahead and share our information and print off our ID information cards from our website or order them to be shipped to your organization. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that all eligible voters are getting out there to vote. We don't necessarily care about your personal beliefs that are bringing you out to the ballot box. We want to make sure that everyone is practicing their right to vote. We work nationwide and have programs in many different states to be able to ensure that voters have identification. This includes working with different sorts of social service organizations on the ground to provide ID drives, we call our ID clinics, to make sure that we are getting the documents in the hands of people that need them and covering the cost, as well as being able to provide training to the community, much like this one. So we provide one-on-one assistance through our helpline that you can call or text. And the number for that will be later in the presentation and at the end as well. We often get questions that are as simple as, I registered to vote recently, but I still haven't received my voter registration card. Am I really registered to vote? Or questions about how to find your polling place. So in addition to helping with ID services, we also are able to assist voters with questions about voting and their registration if they need extra support. But our hope at the end of the day is to be able to empower communities to get out and to be able to empower their own communities, and really be able to make sure that we are creating advocates in the process of sharing this information and making sure that you can also share information with your friends and loved ones about how they could get their ID for free or reduce costs. And I'll go into the exact costs in a moment, but we cover the cost of state IDs, birth certificates, marriage certificates, transportation to and from the DMV and other government offices if needed. In order to be eligible for our program, you must be eligible to register to vote by the next election. So if you're of age to pre-register, we can also assist you. Moving on. So we have our wallet cards on our website, and we can also mail them to you if you're part of a community group that's interested in passing these out. But if you go on our website, you'll find a map like the one on the at the very beginning of the presentation that has all the different ID laws for each state. So if you go to voteriders.org and you click on the picture of your state, you'll see this in case you forget what you can bring for your first time voting. And you can also make sure to share this information with your friends and loved ones. We have a lot of different digital tools on our website to make it really easy for any election questions. And every time that you move, you are considered that you are in a new polling place. So you're considered a first time voter and will need to show ID again. So how much does an ID cost? I found this really interesting on the Pennsylvania website. They broke it down by 4 years and 2 years. So it looks like for a license, about $35, and then the ID card is $32. And then there's no charge for a homeless ID. Once again, I do want to reiterate that it's not just the cost of the printing fee that can be an obstacle for someone to getting an ID. It's also the cost of the supporting documents, such as a birth certificate or a marriage certificate, especially for women who don't have the same name on their state identifications as they do on their marriage license, which is about a good percentage of women. I think it's over half. So, and one story that I always enjoy sharing is that of a Philadelphia resident that I helped about 2 years ago. So by the time that I met Patricia at a voter education forum, she had been trying to obtain her state identification for 10 months. She was from Philadelphia, had recently moved to New Smyrna Beach, Florida, and she was having trouble being able to obtain her documents. And she told me that she had stage 4 cancer and she really needed these documents to be able to get her ID, to go to doctors, because she was so scared of being turned away and not being able to receive her medical treatment. So we got to work right away. I ordered her birth certificate for her on Untitled Chapter, the Department of Health's private website. And then I called the marriage clerk as soon as I could. And I pleaded with them on the phone to please send her marriage certificates. And they said it was going to take 6 weeks. And I said, we can't do that. And so I was very much pleading with them to be able to expedite it. And so what ended up happening is that they expedited it to a niece that she had living in the area. And it regularly would have cost $125 for her marriage certificates because she was married twice. And so they ended up dropping a lot of the fees. So it was expedited for no charge because of her circumstance. But I do want to also share the fact that it took me a very long time to wait on the phone. And that's not something that people typically have the time for in their day-to-day schedule if they're working like a really rigid work schedule. And often people get really frustrated and give up with the bureaucratic hurdles of not knowing who to call or being on hold. And so with Vote Riders, just being really familiar with the process, a lot of the times it's just being able to walk someone through what phone number to call or how they can possibly know how to go about getting their supporting documents, like in Patricia's case. So she got, her niece got the documents and then they were overnighted to her. And so overall, this was about $250, would have been around $250 in fees. But luckily they were nice enough to go ahead and drop the fees for her due to her circumstance. But regularly, this would have been a $300 ID. And so I do want to go ahead and just also reiterate the fact that it can be incredibly expensive to get the supporting documents. And so when people think about whether or not an ID is something that might pose a barrier, that's something that we have to take into consideration. But yeah, so she was able to get her ID within less than a week of me meeting her, luckily. And so she was able to get the ID that she needs to be able to go to the doctor, and then also to be able to register to vote. She registered to vote that same day, and she was really excited about making her voice heard in the upcoming elections. But it's something that I always like to share stories like this because they demonstrate the fact that IDs are needed not just for voting, but also for really crucial things in our lives. But if we don't meet people where they're at and try to really put out these fires that they have going on in their lives, they're not going to be ready for having a civic conversation. And so if we can just really start there, it's really important. But overall, you never know what someone's going through. So please be sure to share our helpline number so that hopefully you can also help someone that needs identification or their supporting documents, or just has questions about voting. But we are always willing to help, and we are always really excited to meet new members of the community and hear what you're passionate about, and to make sure that we are helping you get out to vote. But yeah, thanks so much.
That was terrific, Jaslyn. I am going to share my screen again. I have just one or two more things that I wanted to share with you guys. So people ask, well, I don't know what's on my ballot, so I'm not going to vote. Well, again, in even years, every 4 years, you're going to see the president, the vice president. But every even year, you're going to see a congressional race. You may see a US Senate race. You will see a governor race every 4 years, a lieutenant governor race every 4 years, a state house every 2 years, and a state Senate race every 4 years. This year, for state Senate, anyone who's in an even numbered district will have a state Senate candidate on their ballot. We will have a US Senator on our ballot. We will have congressional. We will have governor, lieutenant governor, and state representative. In the odd years, these are important races. I can't stress enough, and in 2023, I'm hoping we have a 1 hour program on municipal races. These are the people that make decisions that affect your kids, your grandkids, your day-to-day life. Township, borough, city, county, school board. They're the judges that make decisions in your local area as well as statewide. And also what's on my ballot, as I said before, could be ballot questions. Well, some people say to me, oh, Rochelle, I'm not going to vote because I just don't know how to find information on these candidates or this issue. And my response is, well, that may have been true 30, 40 years ago. Might have been very difficult, and all you could get was what the candidates gave you or what you saw on TV. But now there is a wealth of resources. Vote411.org, as I mentioned before, is the one-stop shop that the League of Women Voters offers to every voter in Pennsylvania. It will give you information on the dates of election, the deadlines for election. It will give you a personalized ballot. You put in your address and you get the races and the candidates that are going to be on your ballot, plus biographical information on the candidates, and the candidates in their own words, not edited or made pretty by any PR person, answering questions that the League of Women Voters have posed to them. Moreover, your local League of Women Voters takes that information and puts it into a printed voter's guide. Those voter guides are everywhere. They're in libraries, they're in senior centers, they're in exercise centers. Anywhere that the public will go, we try to get our voter's guide. It's the same information It's on Vote 411. It's in a printed fashion. Also, many times your local newspaper will print a voter's guide. The local leagues put their voter guide on their websites also. So finding out candidate information is no longer difficult. Ballotpedia, I talk about a lot also. It is a nonpartisan encyclopedia of voting elections, gives you candidate information. That includes financial reports, but 411 does not include financial reports. But if you want to know who has given political contribution to a candidate that you're interested in, you just go to Ballotpedia, put in Pennsylvania, and put in whatever race you're concerned with, and you'll get the names of the folks that are running and information on them. VotePA.gov is the Pennsylvania Department of State website, all things elections in PA, all your questions answered about elections. And then factcheck.org is again a non-biased fact-checking organization that when there is misinformation that floats around social media, and I know I'm an old lady, so social media is not my go-to place for information, but it is for a lot of people. Factcheck.org will help give you the facts. So here are the important dates for 2020. You can read them. Please vote. Please follow the deadlines. So your vote matters. Vote. I want to thank you. And now we can take questions. You can, according to Meg, you can raise your hand, or we can look in the Q&A and see what's there.
Thanks, Rochelle. I'm happy to read the questions out loud. The first question we have from Virginia, who asks, when will I receive my ballot in the mail for the primary?
That's a very good question. So each of the 67 counties make a determination of when the ballot can be finalized, and that could depend on whether or not there is objections to people being on the ballot. But what the Department of State has said is the last date that ballots can go out, they must be mailed by May 3rd. So that's the very last date, but each separate county determines the date that they're sending it out. So I would suggest you contact your county voter registration to find out the exact date in your county.
Thanks, Rochelle. The next question comes from Peter, who asks, did a PA court strike down the no excuse absentee ballot? And I saw some talk about this in the chat, so maybe we should clarify.
Yes, I'd be glad to. I did try to respond in the chat, but I realized I shouldn't have. The Pennsylvania Commonwealth Court ruled that Act 77 and mail-in ballots were unconstitutional. That was immediately appealed to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. That is the top court in our state. When it was appealed, there was an automatic stay to the order. A stay means that the order doesn't go into effect. So for the primary, mail-in ballots are very much alive and well. So you can apply for a mail-in ballot and you can vote by mail-in ballot.
Yes, keep applying, keep voting by mail. And we have another question from Rich, who asks that you please explain the 30-day residency requirement. Does the day of your arrival count as day number 1, or is your first day of residency day number 1?
Oh my.
And the election day be day number 30? So I think he's just asking for some clarifying on the actual numbers.
Yeah, you know, that is an excellent question. And I would say that I would need to ask that specific question and I'd be glad to do that, to the Department of State, because I don't know exactly when they start counting that 30 days, but I'd be more than glad to reach out, get your email, and then I can respond directly to you once I get an answer.
Rochelle, to make things simple, I'll just put your email in the chat so that Rich knows how to reach you. Great.
Okay, very good.
So I'm glad to count you as a Pennsylvania voter, Rich, however long you've been here.
Yes.
Great.
And please
Okay.
email me, Rich, please, because I'm going to get you that answer.
Great. Well, I see that there are no more questions in the chat or in the Q&A. So I just want to take a moment to thank both Rochelle and Jaslyn from both writers for this excellent presentation. Again, thank you everyone for joining. We will be sending an email with the slides and the recording of this out by tomorrow, if not early next week. So thanks again for registering, and a final reminder to please go to vote411.org. It's your one-stop shop for everything election related. And we'll be back with the second event of this series next week. You can register for that on the League website. This will talk about election security and voter integrity. So that's next.
Yes. Thank you for putting that plug in, because I was. And I just want to leave you with two wonderful quotes. From President Truman: a vote is the best way of getting the kind of country and the kind of world you want. And this one really resonates with me because I'm kind of spiritual. A vote is a kind of prayer about the world you want to live in. So I just want to leave you with that. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jaslyn. You're terrific.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.